my name is Ashley Forsyth, and for this final, I'll be making one of my favorite breakfast items, Tonga toast, and explaining the ingredients, functionality, and mythology. To start, I made sure I have a nice, clean, empty space to work. I've also made sure that I'm using clean utensils and I've properly stored all my ingredients. Now I'll get into making of the Tonga toast. So in order to make Tonga toast, we will need 1/3 cup of cinnamon sugar. Sugar is sucrose, which is fructose and glucose stuck together and is a carbohydrate. Cinnamon is the most common baking spice that comes from a small evergreen tree and also adds flavor. This ingredient will be later used to sprinkle over the bread in order to add flavor. So we'll set this aside and continue with our other ingredients. So in this recipe, you're going to need 1 egg. The purpose of the egg is to thicken the batter and emulsify. Egg yolks allow you to mix oil-based and water-based liquids and keep them mixed. To prevent oil droplets from merging, a substance known as an emulsifier is required, and in this case, the egg yolk acts as an emulsifier. Many proteins in egg yolk can act as emulsifiers because they have some amino acids that repel water and some amino acids that attract water. When the egg proteins are mixed with oil and water, one part of the protein will stick to the water and another part will stick to the oil. Lecithin, which is found in egg yolk, is known as a phospholipid. It is a fat-like molecule with water-loving head and a long water-fearing tail. The tail gets buried in the fat droplets and its head sticks out of the droplet surface into the surrounding water. This establishes a barrier that prevents the surface of the fat droplet from coming into contact with the surface of another fat droplet. In addition, egg yolks also add tenderness and provide consistent flavor and texture. Our next ingredient, we're going to have 1/4 cup of milk. Milk adds nutrition and browning capabilities. Milk is an emulsion, which is a mixture of two liquids that do not combine, such as oil and water. Milk is a permanent emulsion, which are made by adding a third substance, an emulsifier or emulsifying agent. In the case of milk, which is the emulsion of butter, fat, and water, casein acts as an emulsifier. Casein affects the surface area of a dispersed droplet, allowing the surface area to be thicker and more stable through the continuous phase of the emulsion. Milk is oil and water. This means water is in the continuous phase, also known as the phase which dispersed phase sits in, and the oil is in the dispersed phase, known as the droplet suspended phase. So next ingredient we're going to need is a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. Vanilla will simply be added to the batter to add flavor and to the final product, and that's going to be the purpose of the oil in this recipe. We're also going to need 1 quart of canola oil. Oil is used to deep fry the bread. When food is submerged in the hot oil, it becomes deep fried, which is a dry cooking method because no water is used. Due to the high heat conduction of oil, the bread will cook extremely quickly. The moisture in the bread with the batter will allow it to repel the water. The bread cannot be cooked in oil for too long because much of the water will be lost and the oil will begin to penetrate the food. It is important to watch out for the smoke point of this oil, which is the temperature oil can be heated to before it smokes and discolors. Oil also adds a mild flavor and aroma and relatively high smoke point, which makes the canola oil a good all-purpose oil. The batter the bread is dipped in will further seal in its natural moisture, which creates a barrier. Our next ingredient we're going to need is 1 loaf of sourdough bread, which I have right here. Sourdough bread is leavened with a sourdough starter. The sourdough starter is a natural leaven, which is a mixture of grains and flour and water inhabited by what they call wild yeast and bacteria, which leaven and flavor bread dough. Our final ingredient in making our Tonga toast is going to be 1 banana. Slices of banana will be placed within the bread. I'm going to use this banana later to demonstrate browning. So now that I've explained all the ingredients, I will go into the actual process of making the Tonga toast. So first, I will take the sourdough bread I showed you earlier and cut each piece to be that we're going to dip into the batter to be 1 inch thick. As you can see here, I've already cut that. This is what we're going to eventually dip into the batter that we are about ready to make. So next we will cut the banana into slices and then those slices in half to put into the bread. However, before I do that, I'm going to explain the effect of browning. So to show you the effects of browning, I have cut 3 different bananas into slices at different times. Here you can see slices that were cut 30 minutes ago, then there are slices that are cut 15 minutes ago, and finally there are slices that are just cut now. As you can see, as the slices are left out longer, those slices become darker brown in color, and it's because of enzymatic browning. It's a little hard to see with this lighting, but the top ones are definitely visibly darker than the ones that were just recently cut. Enzymatic browning happens by a chemical process found in most fruits and vegetables. Enzymatic browning can have negative effects during post-harvest storage of fruit. Cutting the bananas releases enzyme and exposes the banana to oxygen. From cutting the banana, oxygen has free access to the plant tissue. In the presence of oxygen, polyoenoxidase, also known as PPO, rapidly oxidize phenolenic chemicals. These chemicals interact with amino acids from proteins, or they self-assemble to form brown polymers. Browning can be slowed down by either decreasing PPO oxidation activity or the quantity of phenols. Coating in sugars, syrup, or other acid foods can decrease oxygen diffusion, speeding down the reaction. So now that I've explained the browning of fruits, specifically bananas in this case, I will continue making the Tonga toast. So I will continue making the Tonga toast by using the banana slices that I most recently sliced, and I'm going to stuff them into the sourdough bread. We will do this by digging little holes and putting the bananas into pockets we have created. It is important though not to go all the way through the bread when creating these pockets. So you're just going to dig little holes into the bread, and you just take your banana slices and just stuff them down into the bread. Put as many as you would like in the pockets that you create. So once the bananas have been put into the bread, we are going to set this aside and continue with putting our finished sugar into a bowl. Once again, this is going to be used later, and this is to add flavor to the final product. So we're going to set this aside and move on with creating our batter. So this batter, we are going to mix together the egg, the milk, and the vanilla. So first we're going to do the milk, which is oil and water, which is an emulsion, which is a small droplets of one liquid suspended in another liquid. It is a mixture of two liquids, in this case butter, fat, and water that do not combine. In addition, the milk adds browning capabilities. So next we're going to move on to the egg. The egg yolks will thicken the batter and emulsify it. An emulsifier is added to an emulsion to stabilize the emulsion. In this case, milk. And will prevent it from separating into polar and nonpolar parts. Found in the egg yolk is lecithin, which enables the egg yolk to be able to stabilize the mixture of two immiscible substances found in the milk. So finally, we're going to move on to the vanilla, which is added for flavor. So once we have all these in here, we're going to mix this, and once I mix this, I will come back and continue making the Tonga toast. So once we have mixed the batter, we will heat a couple inches of canola oil in the pan to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is right over here. So while the oil is warming up, we will dip the bread into the milk-egg mixture we created and let it soak for a few seconds to let it penetrate the bread. Once the oil reaches the correct temperature, we will fry the bread on both sides in hot oil until lightly brown, which will be about 3 minutes. I will let the bread fry in the oil and will come back to show you progress in the end product. Once again, it is important to keep the oil below the smoke point, so therefore it is important to keep an eye on it throughout the process. So this is what the sourdough bread looks like after it has been fried for a little bit. So once the bread has been fried, we'll let it drain on paper towels, and the final step will be to sprinkle on the cinnamon sugar on the bread, and that will just give it some more flavor, as I mentioned before. So thank you for watching my video on the methods of emulsion and browning and how to make Tonga toast.